Hi, everyone. Pastor Fulvachny here. We're at Christ the King Lutheran Church in Danville, Virginia. Thanks for joining us. This is the installment for this weekend of worship, where Sunday is October the 24th. And the epistle that we're looking at is an epistle from the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 7, verses 23 to 28. Hebrews chapter 7, 23 to 28. Hope you're doing well. Hope it's been a good week for you. It has been a delightful week here weather-wise. Moving here to this part of Southern Virginia, South Central Virginia has really been a terrific experience. As a Buffalo boy coming from the north, this is the time of the year when around the Great Lakes, that gray gloom would start to make its way over western New York and beyond, with rain, but sometimes snow, but mostly with no sun. Well, we got sun here, babies, and it is just great. Temperatures are good too. Hey, listen, if you're looking for a place to retire, a place to relocate to, I just want to say this, and I'm very serious about this. The area in and around our city, Danville, Virginia, is one of the most affordable and quality areas that you can possibly have for a retiree. Real estate, fuel costs, services, and other amenities are very, very good here. Plus, I'm getting to be really high on the leadership around here, both in our city and our county, because the governor was here again announcing another major economic boost to the area. Tyson Foods is coming in to spend $300 million on a processing plant that will make some of their frozen and snack food type of things. Their manufacturing plant is going to be over 300,000 square feet, and there's going to be work here. In addition to that, uh, no matter how you feel about gambling and things like that, Caesars Entertainment has announced that they are building a casino here in Danville, from scratch, and they're putting in $500 million into the facility, which will include 500 hotel rooms and entertainment and fine dining and all that kind of stuff. That's a $500 million is coming to a little old textile and tobacco city that only has a population of around 40,000. It is almost unbelievable. The governor was, it seems like the governor shows up whenever any of these big announcements come. And this is going to all happen in the next 2 to 3 years. And the contracts under permits have been pulled and things are moving. Yeah, who'd have thought this would be an exciting place to live? And the reason I say it is because, where people are, that's where ministry takes place. And whether it's tobacco, textiles, steel, automobile manufacturing, manufacturing of chips for automobiles, retail, whatever it is, we as God's people are meant to be where people are. And anything that might attract those people socially, economically, is to be looked at. We may judge some as not to be the best as far as our Christian values go, but the needs of people will surely be there. And we here at Christ the King want to be positioned in order that we might serve the needs of the people who are here and those many we know will be coming. Very good. Oh, you'd think I was working for the Chamber of Commerce here, huh? Well, it is very exciting, I'll tell you. And those are just two things. That by no means does that cover everything that's been announced here and that's in the works over the last year or so. Hebrews 7:23 to 28. Who wrote this? Well, there are probably a half a dozen people who book of Hebrews have been attributed to. And could be Paul, could be Silas, could be a number of others. We get the idea that this epistle seems more like a sermon in its format, and you might want to keep that in mind. The other thing is, this is written to the Christians in and around Jerusalem, possibly some second generation Christians, and at a time where there's pretty severe persecution, both from the established Old Testament Jewish institution in and around Jerusalem and from the Romans as well. So these poor believers in Jesus Christ in Jerusalem at this time were taking the hits, big hits. And so a lot of the book of Hebrews is explaining why it's worth the battle, worth the struggle, and what the wonder of what God has done through Jesus Christ means and how it changes everything. And unfortunately, you know how the devil works. When good things are happening because God is making them happening, the devil is lining up his legions and charging up his batteries to attack, to tear down, and to discourage. You build a church, and Satan will build a little outpost right next to it from which he can take pot shots, shoot fire arrows, and undermine. Hebrews 7:23. Here we go. The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he holds the priesthood permanently because he continues forever. That's an important verse. We'll talk about that. Verse 25. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Verse 27. He has no need, like those priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son, capital S, who has been made perfect forever. Wow. Yeah, this is a little passage here that is meant to be highly, highly instructional, almost like a lecture, certainly like a class on certain important topics here. One of the topics is, what was the old priesthood like? Who filled it? What was its purpose and what were its limitations? Then, coming right on the heels of that, what is the new priesthood like? The oath of the covenant, we might call it, the new promise that God has made since he has established through his Son, Jesus Christ, a priesthood that is forever. And why should those who understand both the old priesthood and now the priesthood that comes through Jesus Christ take interest in this? Well, the short answer is because the priesthood that comes through Jesus Christ has been empowered and guaranteed by God the Father in heaven to be all encompassing and without end. And that's good for sinners. Very good, in fact. All right, let's go back to the beginning here, verse 23. The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. So it seems as if, starting with verse 23, we've stepped kind of in the middle of a discussion or presentation about the priesthood. And with your permission, I'd like to pick up a little bit, just a few verses before this, and give us a little bit of context. In this passage from Hebrews 7, starting with verse 15, Jesus Christ is compared to Melchizedek, who was a very highly regarded priest. The change in God's law is even more evident from the fact that a different priest, who is like Melchizedek, has now come. He became a priest, and by meeting the old requirements of belonging to the tribe of Levi, but by the power of a life that cannot be destroyed. Okay, so in the old institution of the priesthood of the Old Testament, if you were of the tribe of Levi, that made you eligible and made it expected that you would be serving in the temple priesthood. But now we are told by the writer of Hebrews that the power of a life that cannot be destroyed is what qualifies Jesus, the Son of God, for a forever priesthood. And with Jesus's priesthood over God's people, it means that the old system of priesthood has been replaced, updated, and actually the old system has now been archived and retired. The psalmist pointed this out when he said of Christ, "You are a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek." That's a quotation that comes from Psalm 110. Yes, the old requirements about the priesthood was set aside because it was weak and became useless. For the law made nothing perfect, and now a better hope has taken its place, and that is how we draw near to God. So this is kind of cool, theologically, in terms of biblical studies here. The priesthood of the Old Testament was a priesthood and an institution that was established based on God's law. With the coming of Jesus Christ, we know that the law has been satisfied now, and with it, that Old Testament institution of the temple priesthood has been rendered archaic. So now, because of Jesus Christ, his suffering, death, glorious resurrection, and ascension, everything is based on gospel, not law. So God is moved in gospel out of his grace and his mercy and his undeserved love. In the Old Testament, God was moved out of righteousness and an expectation of perfection and obedience. So it's a big, big shift here. And if you come from the background of an Old Testament priesthood model established on law and obedience before a righteous God, it'd be very difficult for you to give that up and to embrace this new priesthood that is based on the very Son of God, Jesus Christ. For one thing, in the old institution of the priesthood, there were many priests, and they served during their earthly lifetimes. And of course, they could serve for their lifetimes, but death would eventually end their service. In the new model of the priesthood that Jesus Christ brings us, there's only one priest, and he is Jesus, and he is the very Son of God. And because death had no power over him, his priesthood and reign has been declared by the Father in heaven to be forever. So that's a major shift, and it would be very difficult for the old timers to embrace the new thing, an understanding of how the law, how the tribe of Levi, and how service meant. That's one thing. Now, with this one person, Jesus of Nazareth, you mean everything that was for generations like that is now funneled into one being? Come on. Well, it doesn't make any sense unless you can acknowledge that Jesus Christ is indeed the second person of the Trinity, that he became incarnate in human form, and that he is the sacrifice for all sins of all time. Now, that's another thing that is hard for some of the old timers to accept. And that has to do with, in the old system of sacrifices, you would have daily, regular kinds of sacrifices. And they would be, according to certain prescriptions of, animals and other appropriate kinds of beings where blood could be shed from them. And it would go on and on and on, and it would be like an industry. And you just expected that, when time came and you had to go make a sacrifice at the temple, well, okay. And then time came again, you'd do it again, and time came again. And even the priests had to make sacrifices for their own sinfulness, because after all, they were just human beings and not holy like God. With the coming of Jesus, God the Father in heaven made a new contract, a new covenant, a new institution. And Jesus alone is that institution. And instead of countless sacrifices of other kinds of living things to bring atonement before God for sins, Jesus, the priest, became the sacrifice. And not only was he the sacrifice, but when his sacrifice was absolute, without blemish, perfect, honorable, and acceptable before a holy and righteous God. The many, 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 many priests could not have satisfied God's desire for righteousness the way that God's only Son has. So again, if this is sounding like a sermon, if this is sounding like a lecture or a presentation, like a class, it's intended to do so. Well, what is the practical value of this? Well, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ of Jewish Old Testament origin, and you're being persecuted by the ongoing, continued Old Testament Jews, priests, and many others, and Romans, you better have a reason as to why you find your belief in Jesus Christ so important. And the writer of Hebrews is trying to point that out. In Jesus, you have a priest who sacrificed himself, for you, whose sacrifice was perfect and holy in every way, and therefore acceptable before a righteous and holy God, and who brings absolute atonement and forgiveness of sins without question, and whose priesthood is not limited. It will go on and on and on, just as sure as the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are eternal, and will go on. And the Father has declared that the priesthood and the work of Jesus Christ will be without end. So, where are you going to get a deal like that in this world, in this life? Where are you going to find a religion like that? And where are you going to find love like that? Jesus brings qualities that no other has or can. And so, as we consider our discipleship living, our life in the kingdom, our worship and service in Christ's church, and our witness to the community, it's because at the core of everything, we have a forever Savior, priest, king. Got it? So when we say that Jesus Christ is the only way to God the Father, the only way of salvation, it's not we're trying to be snooty or something like that. Jesus Christ has done what no other being, religious or otherwise, has. and his work stands forever. Oh, that's good stuff. Verse 25. Wow, we got to the second verse now. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. So there is one mediator between God and man, and he is Jesus Christ. He is the forever priest, and it's under the oath of the covenant that God the Father has said that work that Jesus does will be there forever, and you can count on him. And because Jesus Christ will never die again, that which he has done before will continue, and that makes him different. So governments may rise and fall, political parties may rise and fall, cultures may rise and fall, economies may rise and fall, families may thrive and then vanish, education may rise and fall, peace may flourish for a while and then give way to war. All those things will go up and down and back and forth like a pendulum, but Jesus Christ remains constant and complete. So anybody who makes intercession to God the Father for forgiveness through Jesus Christ is assured of blessing. Verse 26, for it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, and separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. The words used here are just words to give us a sense of the quality of the priesthood of Jesus Christ. Holy. What does holy mean? Holy means set aside by God for sacred purposes. So the opposite of holy might be ordinary, everyday. In the old days, mom and grandma would have a set of china and silverware and cups and saucers and other kinds of things that would come out for the holidays or very special occasions. Otherwise, you were using your everyday stuff. Yeah, your Corningware or whatever it was. But you knew it was a special time when the good stuff came out because that was set aside for special purposes. Jesus Christ was set aside for the purpose of bringing salvation to broken people. Innocent, Jesus Christ being in one nature true man, another nature true God, in one being, was absolutely innocent, without sin, perfect in every way, unstained. Even the purest of the animal sacrifices that came to the temple to be offered up by the priests in the old law driven system of sacrifices had some blemishes somewhere. And if they weren't obvious, well, they could pass as acceptable for sacrifices. But you can be sure that many were not perfect. Separated from sinners. Whoa. So, this is an interesting concept. Jesus Christ came into this world, was born, and lived and ministered among sinners. But he himself, as we are told in Hebrews, was separated from sinners in that even though temptation came his way, he did not succumb to it. Even though he knew every kind of evil, every kind of lie, even though he knew every kind of trickery, even from Satan himself, and certainly from the hands of and the mouths of the people around him, even from his own disciples for a while there, he was not sucked into it. He was absolutely separated because of his nature, and now is exalted above the heavens. So Jesus Christ, who is no longer visible to us with our eyes, is present in glory in the heavens, in the realms where God reigns, where the Father is, and the Son sits at the right hand, and the Holy Spirit also exists. And all of that is real. Sometimes we have to think about the things of God that are real but not seen. And when we fail to do that, then we fail to understand all that God is up to and the blessings we have. Verse 27, he has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. Yeah, if you have a perfect priest, the priest doesn't have to offer a sacrifice because of his own sinfulness. Jesus Christ is the only priest who can meet that standard, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. Isn't that something? So when Jesus Christ died on the cross, did he die for any of his sins? Well, the answer to that is no. There were no sins for him to die for. There were no sins for him to die for. There was no sin in him that would require his death. It's a humbling thing to think that when Jesus Christ offered his life on the cross, it was all because of the sins of others. In fact, of all of humanity. That's sacrificial love. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests. Okay, that was the old system, the Old Testament system of appointing priests to the temple in service to God based on law. But the word of the oath, which we will call the gospel now, motivated by grace, mercy, and undeserved love on God's part, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. That does seem kind of academic and scholarly. It's if it's a sermon, it's a very heavy instructional sermon, and that's just the tone of this particular passage. Well, I can't say that we have uncovered every little bit of interesting nugget in here, but let me just review very quickly some of the ones I hope you will take with you. Number one, I hope you have been able to get a little bit of a taste of the forever priesthood of Jesus Christ. You know, we learn in our catechism that Jesus came as prophet, priest, and king. So in his prophetic ministry, he did signs, miracles, and wonders and teachings like the prophets of the Old Testament, but more. In his priestly ministry, he was bringing the message of his sacrifice on the cross one time, forever, for all people. And with his death, his priesthood did not end, but continues even today. I hope that we, and the kingship as well, that's where it's continuing. Prophet, priest, and king. Number two, I hope you've had a little taste of the divine nature of the priesthood of Jesus Christ. The divine, that means there's God in it. So when those who came from the tribe of Levi and others served as priests, they served in a divine capacity, but they were not divine themselves. Jesus was and continues to be. Third thing is where it says saved to the uttermost. That means people who are embraced in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for their sins are totally and completely released of those sins. And this is incredibly important because we always have this idea that we need to either do more than what we've learned Christ has done for us, or we need to help and do something to go alongside of what Christ has done for us. That's kind of what we call a synergistic theology, and that's absolutely wrong. Dr. Martin Luther of the Reformation era made it very, very clear after years and years and years of careful Bible study that Sinners have nothing to contribute to their salvation. It is only by the grace of God and by the obedience of Jesus Christ that salvation can be had. And once salvation is granted, we should never get the idea that, oh, now we can do something to enhance that, or maybe we should do something to repay God for what he's given us. Not in the area of forgiveness. Forgiveness is all of God's work upon us, what we call justification. Now, as a natural response to what we have received, we become holy people, not ordinary anymore, holy, set aside, set apart for wondrous works in the kingdom, loving God and loving our neighbors. I want you to remember that now the priesthood is known even in glory. So as Jesus Christ is reigning over heaven and earth now and is king over all things, his priesthood continues so that those who call upon him for forgiveness, call upon him for mercy, call upon him for access to the Father in heaven, that continues and that will never stop. As long as Jesus Christ is on his throne and is continued to be held by the Father as the priest for all time and eternity, all who call upon him will be satisfied. All right, a couple of things there. I hope it's been helpful. Hope you have a blessed week. I can hardly believe that we're at the end of October. And just a reminder that as everyone else is looking to celebrate Halloween, we're looking to acknowledge the Reformation of the church. God be with you. God bless you. Bye-bye.